I am so excited to be here today. This is my first big press conference, so it is nice to see all of you. Okay, so I want to start out by telling you some of the successes that we're seeing across the state and how teachers are feeling in the classroom when it comes to the different things that are going on, the new changes that we're having. So as far as I'm in good contact with the university systems, and of course EdTPA has rolled out where they the teacher preparation tool assessment, and professors are really they enjoy that tool because it is pushing their students harder than it has in the past. I got a chance to sit in on some end of the year capstone kind of things and to see students how they progressed, and they talk about the different things that they've learned in EdTPA through the assessment, and it seems to be a challenge for them, which is what we want for our teachers. Also a huge thing this year, of course, was for us was Common Core, and a lot of teachers, for the most part across the state, everyone has implemented the Common Core starting now. And for the most part, it has been successful, especially when you look at kindergarten teachers. When you talk to kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers, they can really tell you that they have seen tremendous growth from kindergarten to first grade. As for teachers who are getting students who may have come in fifth grade going into sixth grade, of course there's a little gap that they're seeing that they have to accommodate for in the classroom. But overall, they really appreciate the rigor that the Common Core provides. The teacher keys and leader keys also have been rolled out, and for the most part, most schools are doing the teacher keys in some form. Now, every teacher is not quite on the teacher keys yet or won't be assessed by teacher keys yet, but hopefully within the next year, everyone will be. And the leader keys as well. Now, the leader keys, teachers are really excited about the leader keys because they feel like finally the things that they want from their leadership will be presented through these leader keys. I got a chance to talk to a teacher in North Fulton, and she's really excited about the things that they're doing up there. They have an AP government class that they have rolled out for 8th grade. So they are pushing their kids even beyond the Common Core into AP classes in the 8th grade. Now, this is the first year they're doing it. It's a pilot, so they're not sure how it'll work out. But so far, parents are very engaged because they're finding that their students aren't quite on an AP level yet, even though they really shouldn't be in 8th grade. But parents, they always want their kids to be as successful as they can be. I've also seen and talked to teachers who have seen an increased partnership with schools and businesses. So during the bus trip that GPEB puts on, we got a chance to go up to Dalton, and we saw how they partner with their local schools. Their carpet industry partners with the local school systems. And in Bullitt County, we have several partnerships, businesses that are now going into the schools and teaching the kids on a regular basis, once a week, once a month, just depending on what it is. And they will go into the schools and teach kids. Now, of course, we also have some concerns. And those concerns are always funding. And funding affects our class size and the days out, furlough days, and the days that kids are actually receiving instruction. There are also concerns about the test alignment. Will this new CCGPS test be aligned to the Common Core? And also the other concerns with the Common Core are that, will we have to switch again? We've been from QCCs, I'm not sure what it was before QCCs, but since I've been teaching, we've had QCCs and GPS, and now we're on to CCGPS. So we're hoping that we can hold on to the CCGPS long enough to see that it's working and that it's beneficial for students. I'm looking forward. What we are hoping to have is lots of professional development in the area of being able to teach the CCGPS effectively. Now, we have had opportunities to have it. People are doing a great job of putting things online so that teachers don't have to leave the classroom. They can do that on their own time to find professional development. But there are also those professional developments where you do get training outside of the classroom. So as of right now, we are looking forward to the Common Core and hoping that we can see it stick around long enough to work so that it can benefit our students. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Jamela as far as her tenure as the teacher of the year?
Well, I'll ask you one. We talked earlier, and I don't know if you were in here, but about the political environment in terms of funding for education. In your travels, have you gotten any sense that there is a different mood, that people are more inclined to raise taxes to pay for education, or do you sense it's kind of the way it was?
I think it depends on the area a lot. Depending on the area, some areas are willing to raise taxes, and thank you. They are wanting to raise taxes in some areas, and some areas are saying that we need to make cuts other places, that we need to, make sure that we are spending what we have. So it just depends on the area, I think.
Could you talk a little bit about special education, where you think the state is doing a good job and where we could be better?
That's a great question. I will tell you that we have a hard time finding special ed teachers. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the amount of paperwork that comes along with special ed. And it's not to say that all of the paperwork is not important, but I believe that there are things that may be, that we can change, that would improve the process of special ed paperwork and making sure that those kids are getting the individualized attention they need. I think that there's sometimes a concern that we are, even though students have individualized plans, that we are making it more grouped plans rather than individualized. So just teacher prep so that we can get more special ed teachers.
I have a quick question. It's based on your last comment you made, because we did go from QCC to Georgia Performance Standards to Common Core, and honestly, it seems it rolls with the political tide. So depending on the election in a couple of years, we could be out of Common Core as well, and teachers would be in the fourth standard in 2 decades. Are teachers kind of not jumping in with both feet because you have no idea if it's going to change? I mean, how tenuous does it feel?
We're nervous about that.
I mean, why would you do it? Because I mean, it could very well change.
Because, and we're putting a lot of funding into it. We're putting a lot of time into it, and I think that this year teachers are finally saying, okay, because CCGPS has been coming out for a while. So I think at first we were a little apprehensive, but now it seems like it's going to be around for a while. We're hoping. So we are more so going all in than in previous. Yes.
I'm sure she'll be happy to take more questions if y'all have it afterwards. I have about, I can't see this glare, about 5 minutes or so. So what I'd like to do is talk about our College and Career Ready Performance Index real quick, because there are some fairly large changes from the one that we put out back in the spring. So if you hear anything from what I tell you today, I want you to understand that doing an apples-to-apples comparison from the one we put out before is just not a good idea. It's just the way the indicators are rolling out. Remember that first year when we got the waiver from No Child Left Behind, it was very clear that that was what they called a study year, that you implement that, you put all those indicators in there and you figure out percentages, and then you see what works, what feedback you get and where changes need to be made. So while on the surface, if you were to look at indicators, all of those, and the percentages, it doesn't look like a dramatic change, but because some of the indicators are fairly significant, you just won't notice it by reading it, and also some of the percentages are different, it's very, very difficult to get an apples-to-apples comparison. So I want y'all to hear that and understand the need to compare one year to another, because this is no longer a study year. This one coming out would be what we hope would be the final, and that changes aren't made after that, that you can start to do that from there. But let me mention a couple of the biggest changes. Before, last year, you would have one of the indicators that may have said that a student gets credit towards a school's CCRPI if they pass the class. Well, what wasn't in there is that they had to actually pass the accompanying standardized test. And what may have happened is some grade inflation could have happened, where more kids were passing certain courses and weren't passing the accompanying standardized tests and CRCTs and end of course tests. So that's a pretty major change, and a pretty major change for the school districts. Another is that the actual percentage, I'm not going to get into all the weeds of this, but generally there were 3 buckets that went into CCRPI. The achievement, which is the overall calculation of it. Then you had the progress, how well they were doing, what kind of changes we're seeing, and then a gap closure between the lowest performing students and the higher performing students. Those were 70% for achievement, 15% for progress, and 15% for gap closure. That was last year's. This year's what was 70%, that achievement is going to be 60%. And where that 10% is going is into the progress, because a lot of, not just school districts, but a lot of people were talking about the importance of improvement. You know, yes, the absolute bar is extremely important, and we want all students to get to a certain level. But as important would be, you know, as a teacher taking a 3rd grader who's on 1st grade reading level from 1st grade reading level to 2nd grade reading level. Absolutely, that's important. And while they're not at the absolute bar, they should get credit for that. So you'll see that progress will move from 15% to 25%, and then that gap closure is still at 15%. So again, I hope you can see just in that quick calculation that doing a pure apples to apples is just really not doable. Not to mention, of course, some of those indicators. And there are a variety of indicators that are a little different too, and I don't have time to go into all of them, but it's going to be more rigorous. You're likely to see scores lower for your districts. What I would encourage you to do, because our school districts right now are really going through that verifying process, looking at the data that's come in and ensuring that they've submitted all the data and that kind of thing. Talk with them about it, see what they're seeing. They won't know final scores yet because it's not final on our end, but talk with them, see what they're feeling, and because we're starting to hear from them, and it's pretty clear that some of the scores are going to go down. But again, we see that as a very accurate and rigorous measure to hold everybody accountable to. So with that, I have 1 minute for a question or two.
Do you know when we can expect those results to come out?
Hopefully in a few weeks. I'm just going to say a few weeks, because some of this, because of the changes, we also had, you know, districts not submitting certain pieces of data that, you know, are pretty big on their indicators. So we've opened that verification process up. So they're going through that right now. Once we run those verifications, and again, this in some ways this is like doing it for the first time, because it's very different from the first time we did it back in the spring. So I'll try to commit to a few weeks. You'll get notice, and I will probably put out some kind of advisory to let you know when, but also a release, pre-CCRPI release, to give you some sense of what are these final changes, so that you can really start to get your heads around how it's going to look and what the differences are.
Matt, is achievement only this year CRCT and EOCT, or is there more?
Well, achievement is more than
More
the
than
standardized tests, graduation rates,
okay.
and there are a variety of other things depending on elementary, middle, and
But
high
the
school.
standardized is EOCT and CRCT.
Correct.
This year.
Yeah.
Next year, what will it be?
Next year will be the new test, whatever that new test is. So y'all know that we're not in park anymore. So we're working on that process of what the new test will be. But for the purposes of CCRPI that comes out in the next few weeks, it'll be based on graduation rates and other things, but the standardized test will be CRCT and EOCT. Okay? I'm here if y'all have other questions later. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. I'm Steve Dollinger. I'm president of the partnership, and I will echo the welcome that you got earlier this morning to our annual Media Symposium. And I thank Bill for putting this together. It's great to have you folks with us every year. Some of you have been with us almost all of the 8 years we've done this, and others are new, but we welcome all of you either back or for the first time. We're fortunate, the partnership, that our board is made up of all the stakeholders. My chair is always a business leader, but a lot of the people you hear speaking today make up our board. We have a lot of folks by virtue of their position. We have the state superintendent, the chancellor, have the Technical College System of Georgia, the House and Senate Education Committee chairs you'll hear in a few minutes. Jamela, we always have the Teacher of the Year, and thank you, Jamela, for being with us today too. So that helps us keep abreast of the issues. So when our board comes together, you can imagine we have some pretty good conversations. But we wanted to adjust our agenda today to make sure that we could give Bobby Cagle, the Commissioner of the Department of Early Care and Learning, a chance to talk about some really great news. It was released a couple weeks ago, but just to make sure everyone knows about that. Since Bobby's been the commissioner, actually it's 3 years this month that he came to be the commissioner of DECAL. In that time, he has really helped to focus and align the curriculum. He's worked on quality rating, which is a really good 3-star system for early care centers. And we talk about that a lot as we go across the state to ask chambers and business community leaders to really look at what are the star ratings of your early care centers to make sure that they're in that process and maybe can improve their performance, really help the kids in the early part of the pipeline. But for that exciting news, and you actually heard the governor's policy advisor allude to this during her time, I want to welcome Bobby Cagle to talk about that exciting news and his new grant. Commissioner?
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. It is near the anniversary of my 3rd year. Actually, tomorrow will be that, and if you recall what was going on at that time, we were in the midst of an ice storm, so I hope we don't repeat that one. Just for those who may not be as familiar with the Department of Early Care and Learning, just to give you a little background. This department was created by the state legislature and at the urging of Governor Perdue in 2004, and it really merged several offices that did this work, including units from DOE, the Department of Human Resources, and the Child Care Council. At first, this was called the Office of School Readiness, and I think that has continued to be our aim, is assuring that children enter school ready to learn. We're only one of 3 in the nation that are focused solely on early childhood education. I would predict to you that you'll see that number grow in the near future. We do have done several calls with other states who are looking at Georgia as a model with regard to how we have structured our department. We run the state's pre-K program, serving 84,000 children annually. We license and regulate about 6,000 child care facilities around the state. We are the agency that administers child care subsidy program, the Child Care Development Fund. We also operate a program that is very similar to the school lunch program. It is called the Child and Adult Care Food Program through the USDA, and our federal nutrition programs actually serve about 88 million meals a year in communities all around the state through contracts. We also have instituted quality rated, which I'll talk a little bit more about a little later. This is a system that is designed to assess and communicate to parents and improve the quality of early education in our facilities around the state. We also house the Head Start Collaboration Office. We do not directly control Head Start funds, but we do have a great collaborative relationship, and that is due in large measure to the fact that we have this person in our office to help us with that coordination and collaboration. And then we also oversee a network of child care resource and referral agencies across the state. Many of you in the metro area may be familiar with Quality Care for Children. They're one of our grantees through our CCR and our contracts. We operate as a department based upon a balanced scorecard approach. Our strategic planning is done in themes. The 3 themes our department are health and safety. We think that's our first and foremost responsibility, assuring that children have a safe environment to learn and that their parents can depend on. We also are focused very heavily on quality, ensuring that the quality of early care and learning programs across the state improves. And one of the things that I have stressed very much during my first 3 years is organizational excellence. And we do that through stakeholder engagement. I think our department was somewhat lacking in this area. And we have made a concerted effort to both engage with the media, but all of the stakeholders around the state. We communicate with about 400 stakeholder groups in this state on a regular basis, and actually have a staff person whose part of her responsibility is the continual conversation with them. We are working on enterprise solutions, meaning that we're trying to work across the programs that we have as opposed to working in silos. And then focusing not just on workforce development with our early care and learning programs, but also workforce development within our department. In the health and safety realm, this year, as a matter of fact, January 1st of this year, there is a new law that's gone into effect. It is for fingerprint-based background checks that are required of all new employees of child care facilities around the state. That took place on January 1st. We're predicting that we'll do about 20,000 background checks in the first year. And those are background checks that have a comprehensive look across the United States so that we know the kind of criminal backgrounds that may or may not be present with those people who work with our youngest learners. The satisfactory background checks, I think, are really pivotal in the realm of safety. We've had a couple of fairly significant opportunities to see the failure of the previous system, where we could only do local checks. That limited our ability to see the criminal background of those who came from other states. You may remember within the last year or so, we had a situation in Macon where we had 2 convicted felons from the state of Florida that were working in a child care facility, and we were only aware of that because a citizen called and reported that to us, and we were able to investigate. This will hopefully get us to the point where we can catch that before those people ever step into a classroom. This applies to new employees as of January 1st of this year. Existing employees of child care facilities do not have to do this until January 1st of 2017. I can tell you that we have been polling existing providers about their current employees. A good portion of those do intend to have, within the first year, their entire staff run through this process, and we're encouraging that. As Steve said, we are very, very excited at this point in time. We have been awarded as one of 6 states an Early Learning Challenge grant. This will mean $51.7 million to our early learning system over the next 4 years. We were one of 6 grantees, as I said, and were actually awarded the highest amount of money in those groups. This is really a grant that allows us to work at the system level. I'm asked oftentimes, is this something that will be direct grants to programs? We do have portions of this grant that will go directly to programs. The vast majority of this, however, is used to build systems, and I'll tell you a little more about that. Our application focused on 4 strategies: access to high-quality opportunities. If you have followed early care and education, we have a lack of quality in this state, and that's one of the reasons that we have instituted Quality Rated as an attempt to ascertain what the quality level is, communicate that to parents so that they can make an informed decision for themselves and their child. We also will be investing heavily in early childhood educators and high-quality programs. One of the strengths noted by the reviewers when they looked at our grant application was the fact that the state of Georgia has heavily invested in the Hope Scholarship and the Hope Grants. The Hope Grants, the technical colleges, are the ones who train the vast majority of the early childhood educators in this state. So we will be investing in those people, giving them opportunities to improve their level of education, but also investing in a lot of training for them that they need. We will be integrating across programs and services. So, for instance, if we are talking about the Georgia Early Learning and Development Standards, we will be embedding those in our quality rated system so that all programs participating in that will have to have training and knowledge and use that in their classrooms. We also are focused on measurement and data capacity expansion. And this is a expansion of the unified data system that the state's been working on for some time, and really will help us understand where our students are and help our teachers know where they are the first day they walk in their classroom. Some examples of these projects, I mentioned the quality rated access and availability. One of the things that we will do is to invest more heavily in our child care subsidy programs, paying for quality. So if you have a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star rating at each level, we will invest more money per student served in our subsidy program. The intent there is to get high quality for those children who are most in need. And I think that is one of the best things that we can do with the money. We'll also be endeavoring to validate our quality rating system. We have been doing data collection on that since day one, and we're at the point now where we can begin to look at the validity of the system and how it impacts child outcomes. We also, again, are investing in the early education workforce, intensive trainings on our early learning and development standards, scholarships to improve educational qualifications. I would tell you that for the most part, we think we can cover the cost of a degree, be it a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, depending on their eligibility for the HOPE grant and the HOPE scholarship. So we're wanting to encourage early childhood educators to take the step to improve their skills and knowledge. We're also going to be working in conjunction, I'm seeing Dr. Barge in the back, with the Department of Education to retool the G-Kids system. That is a formative assessment system that is currently used in our kindergarten classrooms. Typically takes place toward the middle to the end of the year in the kindergarten system. And this will actually take that formative assessment and back it up. Start it out actually within 6 weeks to 2 months of the beginning of the kindergarten year. What this will do is allow us to know where the children are much more quickly. We currently know that for those kids who go through pre-K because we've been able to link the data that our pre-K teachers collect into the unified data system, and the kindergarten teachers can see the assessments. For those that have not been through pre-K, it's essential that we get an understanding of where they're at on day one so the teacher can differentiate instruction. We also will be investing in family engagement and community grants. I know that Maureen has blogged as recent as today, I think, regarding the importance of the family engagement. We know that the engagement of families, having students that are really invested in what they're doing, but having parents help them. And you know, we really want to take this beyond what we have had in the past. We have had parents that have been the people who have taken responsibility for bringing cupcakes to class, those kind of things. And certainly we want to encourage parents to be in the classroom. But we really want to take that beyond and have them extend the learning that the children have in the classroom by taking it home and working with the child themselves. And again, the development of the unified data system is a key component of the application that we put forward. Our next steps, we have 3 months. This is very similar to the process that the state went through in the Race to the Top K-12 grant. We have 3 months to submit a revised scope of work with deliverables and milestones. Following that, the Federal Department of Education and the Health and Human Services Department will have up to 3 months to review and approve those scopes of work. We do have the authority to begin pulling down and expending funds almost immediately. We're working on getting financial information to them now that we need to get those funds, and what that will do is allow us to put the infrastructure in place within our department to be able to administer this grant. We will also be working with a list of participating agencies and other community organizations, and I'll forward on to that. So this will give you some idea of the kind of collaborative work that had to be done in order for us to get this grant. These are all departments that we worked with on specific projects that were proposed in the grant. So there is a good deal of money that will be funneled through other departments as well in order to reinforce collaborative relationships, but put in place really key things that we need to do. Our quality rated system is, again, our key way of getting quality improvements in our early childhood education programs. This is a voluntary system currently, and it assesses, improves, and communicates the level of quality in our programs. We have 293 rated programs with nearly 1,300 participating. This is out of 6,000 total programs in the state. We most recently have looked at ways of actually extending the high quality work that's already going on to those other facilities around the state by hosting a leadership conference that really brought together the best of the best in the state to talk about how they could go back to their communities and actually help other providers get to the point where they are. We are pretty well out there with regard to social media. Reg Griffin, our Chief Communications Officer, is in the back of the room. He has really taken us to a level that we could not even have imagined with regard to use of social media over the past couple of years. We have a presence on Facebook with nearly 1,600 likes. We also have 683 followers on Twitter. We encourage each one of you to engage with us on that, and we make a sincere effort to use those as primary vehicles for getting information out about what we're doing within the department. And I think probably got 2 or 3 minutes for questions, so glad to answer any questions you might have.
What's the Twitter handle?
The Twitter feed, I think we'll give that to you in the next, no, Reg, can you get them the Twitter feed?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So it's been 20 years since Georgia started really focusing on pre-K. Have you been able to cohort any of those kids? I mean, now we've gone through 3 graduating classes. Have you been able to cohort the kids that started in the early years, and if those gains they saw throughout their K-12 career?
That has not actually been possible until very recently. We started, my first year in this position, the legislature requested that we do a study, longitudinal study, that looks at exactly that. So on a statewide level, we've not been able to do that because we didn't have a way of individually identifying and following students. The Unified Data System and the unique identifier that we assign through that allows us to actually conduct that study. That did commence last year. We've had the first installment of that study. It is continuing and will at least through 3rd grade for the cohort that we picked up. So that is coming. I can tell you, however, that we've also had other studies in the state that have followed students for much longer. The University of Georgia has done work in Athens-Clarke County that has followed students all the way through high school and have found significant gains in all areas, especially in reading and mathematics, up until the 8th grade. So I think we have a kind of a micro look at the system. Now we're taking that macro look with the encouragement of the legislature and their support through the funding that it requires. Yes, sir.
Where I'm from, which is Clark County, the main access problem is just access period, more so than quality. Is this grant going to increase the number of slots for kids?
This grant is not focused on increasing slots in pre-K. We do know that there is a issue with access. I think if you follow the Jack Hill, Chairman Jack Hill's blogs and his email blasts, he addresses that today in one of his articles. We do have 84,000 students. We think that is about 60% of the state's 4-year-olds. So you can see that there is a segment of students that would want it. We do know that we have a waiting list. I think the last count we have was about 6,000 kids on the waiting list. So at this point, we have solely depended upon the funding from the lottery. And so what we're waiting on right now is the most recent update on lottery funds. Our proposal this year, however, was not to expand slots because we're wanting to increase quality. And in doing what we've proposed to do, I think we can do that for all students within the program already, and that is to bring down class sizes. Now, that comes with a heavy price tag, so we're waiting on the governor's budget to see if we can actually afford to do this. If you bring the class size down from 22 students, which is currently, if you'll recall, this number was actually 20 students until 2011 when we had to kind of curtail our funding there. And we raised class sizes in order to be able to continue a full-day program. Bringing that class size down by one student will cost $16 million annually. If you bring it down by 2 students, that's an additional $32 million annually. So access is something that we definitely are concerned with, and the availability of high-quality providers that could actually provide that is another thing. And I think that's where our grant comes in. It really gives us the capability to expand when we do have the opportunity, because currently some of the areas where the highest need exists, we don't have providers that could, with fidelity, implement the quality program that we've had in our Georgia's pre-K system. Thank you very much.
By the way, the Twitter feed is at GA Department DEPT and then Early Care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bobby. Interesting information to help you understand the complexities we were talking about earlier when Claire Suggs was talking about funding, and just get into staffing and quality of programming, and some of those pieces become really competitive. And also, Bobby was correct about marine blogging this morning. It was a really good example of a best practice in the Gainesville City Public Schools and what they're doing to help young kids and also parents get more involved in the education of their young kids. So that was an interesting piece. Okay, now we're going to have to bring up some chairs here for the next portion of our program. This is a part that you folks usually really like a lot. This is going to be the foreshadowing of the upcoming legislative session. You've got the long bios, remember, in your packets, but as the next 3 people come forward, I'll just give you a little bit about them. Representative Coleman, as you can see there, was a career educator, teacher, and administrator, and he's a motivational speaker, so we always like him to bring that skill set that he's so good with to one of our panels. Always makes it interesting. Senator Tippins is a businessman, has his own company. Interestingly, his perspective of education is augmented with his experience of being on the Cobb County School Board, in fact, being a chair of that board for a number of years. And then Kelly McCutcheon is the president and CEO of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. He's just finished his 2 decades there. We thought it would be interesting to have not just 2 legislators, but someone who is very involved in policy issues with a different perspective than being a legislator. Kelly and I serve on the Georgia Chambers Board, and he's also on their Education Committee. So that gives us 3 perspectives. So gentlemen, if you'll come forward and take a seat, what we're going to ask them to do is each take a turn to briefly give you their forecast of the upcoming session, but we're going to leave most of the time for you because you usually suck up this whole time for Q&A, so we're going to give you that opportunity, but then we'll let each of them have a brief summary comment at the end. So gentlemen, welcome, and we'll just start on this end with Senator Tippins.
Hello, it's good to be with you this afternoon. I'll give you a very brief synopsis of what I see the major issues in the upcoming session. The number one issue that you always see is the level of educational funding that the state's going to have in the FY15 budget. All school districts, school systems, and boards of education wait expectantly to see what that budget number is so they can look at their existing budget in terms of the supplemental budget and also the upcoming year. It's a very big issue. They also, most of the time in the spring of the year, get the revenue estimate from the local tax assessors as to what the digest is going to be. That's a very big issue and has been for the last 5 years or 6 years since we've been in a recession. some counties are recovering well, some are not doing very well, but overall, I think statewide, the digest have fallen. I know in my local county of Cobb, in the last 5 years, the digest has shrunk by a little over 17%. So that's huge in terms of the fact of the amount of funds available for local school districts. And most local school districts get the majority of their local funding from the local tax digest. And then the state funding provides, in most cases, a little bit less than 50% of the total funding that school districts receive. I guess the second biggest issue that's probably been the most noteworthy in the state is the Common Core legislation that Senator Ligon has. It's still pending in the Senate, and I cannot tell you right now what the outcome of that's going to be. I will say this: I think the governor has acted very prudently back in the spring and early summer when he withdrew Georgia from the testing consortium. I think most people that understand the process of education realize that whoever controls the test is going to ultimately drive the curriculum and what's taught in the classroom, and who controls the testing piece, that's very, very critical. The governor has also charged the State Board of Education to do an extensive review of the Common Core standards in math and English language arts. And I'll say those are the only two domains that have been adopted at this time. He has charged the State Board of Education to do an extensive review of those standards to make a determination. Are they as rigorous as they should be? And if they are not, make suggestions as to how they can be augmented or supplemented. And I think the State Board of Education, in the conversations I've had with them, has taken that charge very seriously. Thirdly, I guess the other issue that may or may not come up, there's a piece of pending legislation, I think, in the House about modifying eSPLOST as to whether those funds can be used for multiple uses or remain only for capital expenditure. There's also some talk about having another piece of legislation to give school districts the ability to impose a local 1% sales tax for maintenance and operations. I think these are probably the biggest impact issues that we'll face in the upcoming year. There'll be some more legislation that will be brought. I know there'll be some legislation brought dealing with the zero tolerance of weapons in schools and doing away with the zero tolerance policy. And I'll say this as a disclaimer. The two bills that are being looked at now were done prior to the Federal Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General, calling for this action to be taken. And I think they're both coming from the Republican caucus, one in the House and one in the Senate. But the zero tolerance weapon laws have caused a problem in schools, and I think we'll see some legislation dealing with that this year. I'll wrap up my comments with that.
Very good.
Representative Coleman wanted me to go next. I guess he's got a big announcement for us.
No, I just want to hear what's the real.
Well, I'm certainly not going to suggest that I know better than these two fine gentlemen what's going to happen in the legislature. I'd like to take my time to really talk about two things that I think are very positive going on in education that a lot of people don't talk about. The first is as we shift from measuring absolute performance to student growth. And that's a huge transition, but I think it's really important because it's so much more fair. I mean, imagine if Senator Tippins and I were two teachers, and under the old system, my kids were in the 90th percentile and his were in the 70th percentile. Assume I was, my school, in my class was doing so much better. But then what if you knew that my kids started off in the 95th percentile and actually went backwards, and his started off in the 40th percentile, made huge gains. And that's what we have in some of our schools. We've been studying schools for years in Georgia. You got some of those great stories. And that's really the most important information. And we've never had that before. And so the CCRPI and this whole effort to look at student growth is really important and much more objective. Second is the state's longitudinal data system. Not a very sexy name, but I know Walter has written a lot of articles a long time ago in Georgia about a lot of money wasted in our state on trying to put together a state data system. And it took years and years and years, and many, many systems didn't work. And quietly and sort of under the radar over the last few years, the Department of Education has put together a system that works. We have, I think, 7 years of historical data now. Every teacher in the state has access to this system. When a new child transfers into their classroom, they immediately can go online. They don't have to go find some file in the basement. They can go online and pull out all the records, the test scores, all the history for that child. They can have a dashboard view of the student absences. We know how important that is for learning. And now, every child, you can drill down into each standard on the test questions they missed and assign resources. We have 22,000 resources, extracurricular videos and other types of resources that the kids can learn, help to leverage the teacher's time. And I think that is going to have a huge impact. I'm even more excited as a parent. What they're working on, I think it's going to be available this year, is a color-coded knowledge map, and they call it a learning pathway, where, for example, you go to a student-teacher meeting, and you pull up the first subject for your child, and it lists all these dots, all the math standards from K through 12 that your child's going to have to master, and they're all color-coded. Green, in which they've mastered them, yellow, meaning they're proficient, and red, meaning they did not meet the standard. And very simple to look and see where the holes are in your child's knowledge. And imagine if you're going off in the summer, now you know what to get your child to go do, because that child now is going to be able to go and click on those red dots. It's fractions, watch a video about fractions, and then do some practice tests and work on it, as opposed to just some vague, you need to work on math over the summer. Now, I just think that alone is going to be very empowering. And if you haven't seen this system, I'm sure the Department of Education can put together a demo for you, but it really is powerful. And it doesn't get it's not open to the public appropriately, but they have a demo site available that you can look at it. So I think there are a lot of things good going on in education in Georgia. I think the student achievement results and the improvement that we've been making over the last 10 years is a good indication of that. We can do a lot better, but there are some good things happening. Thanks.
It's so good to be with you. I always enjoy this and get to meet with this group. But I wanted them to go first because they have really talked about the key issues that we think all these committees and all these gurus think are so important with education this year. But I don't know how many of you attended, but we did something this year in the Senate and the House that's never been done in the history of this state. We took a tour. We decided that we needed to go out there and see what was really happening. And I'm going to tell you, my eyes were open, weren't yours, Lindsay? I had never in my life been overwhelmed. I thought at first, this is just going to be an activity to go out there, but I was really overwhelmed and humbled by what I saw. We decided we'd take a tour. How many of you attended one of our listening sessions? Don't you agree? I mean, it was just awesome, some of the things we heard. And I want to keep your names afterwards because I need to get with you because we're going to do a little something in the next couple of weeks with you, those of you attended. But we took 8 listening sessions throughout the state. We started out in Noonan, went up to Dahlonega. We hit Gwinnett County, Vidalia, Eastman. We hit Albany. We went to Savannah. We went to Augusta and ended up. Not only did we just listen, but we also visited schools. And I'm going to tell you, we saw a lot of things going on, and we saw a lot of diversity in this state. We had over 150 of the 180 superintendents that attended these sessions. They met with us from 3 to about 4:30 every time we met. We had over 200 board members that attended and talked with us from about 4:30 to 5:30. And then we did something that teachers had asked us to do we never had. They said, we can't come to your education meetings. Do something where we can be there. So we started from 6:30 to almost 9 o'clock. We had one meeting, what was it, Lindsay? About 60 people who spoke. But we had busloads of teachers who came, over 1,500 teachers, parents, community leaders that came and talked to us about their concerns and the things they liked about education. We were really overwhelmed. And you heard what Kelly talked about, you heard what Lindsay talked about, and that has really helped mold what a lot of the things we want to do this year, we think we need to do, because we listen to these superintendents and think. And I just want to summarize quickly, and then we'll take your questions, the things they said, that the people out there, where the rubber meets the road, what they said. First of all, they said the same thing, budget. Money is important. Money is acceptable way to say I love you. Come on, love us a little bit. Give us some money, they said out there. And they were concerned. They said start restoring the austerity cuts. You know, QBE, the governor, you know, we're talking about in the 2015, maybe revising the funding formula. Until, let's start restoring some of that money. We know we don't have the money to do it all, but let's do some of that. Put the money in the fund and let us have the flexibility to use it how we want to. Restore school days. We were shocked to find that most systems did not have 180 days out there. I think the lowest we saw, Lindsay, was 150. One school system had 150 days. We were shocked to see the number of furlough days that were out there. They said that would be a teacher raise if we just restore furlough days. So give us some, you know, start helping us there. That was the one thing. Another thing they did, they talked about eSPLOS. We have 10 systems out there that over the years ago, were given the right to use eSPLOS for M&O. They were doing fine. We were shocked to see that those systems really did not have as much of a financial problem as some of the others that did not have that right. So they were saying, you know, give us the right to take that eSPLOS, to use it for M&O if we don't need it for capital. And there is a proposal for another. And people, we're not talking about something that we're going to mandate. They said, just give us the option. Let it be a local decision there. They talked about something else that's very important. They talked about the teacher evaluation system. You know, we hear a lot of criticism about that, but I was surprised the teachers said we like it. We had teachers that said, you know, for the first time since I've been teaching, a principal's actually spending 4 or 5 days in my classroom. He's spending time. He's talking to me. We like it. The principals and superintendents said we don't have enough hands to do it. Now, people, I'm speaking in my auction speed, so if you want me to slow down, holler sold, and I'll slow down. That's right. I'm a licensed auctioneer also, and I do that sometimes. But they talked about that. They like it, but they need more hands to do it. Testing. They said, some of them said we're over testing. We need to look at the whole thing of testing. Lindsay made a statement every meeting we went to, said, you know, these concerns you have, write them down. Give us examples. We want to know what your concerns are. They have concerns about so many policies, so many laws that are tying their hands. We instructed them, send us those examples. And in our Title 20 reduction we look at every year, we'll take a look at those. And if we need to get rid of them, we will. Do you know we had a law on the books that said you could not have computers in a classroom? Wow. Wasn't that interesting? So those are kind of things we looked at. Kelly, I love what you said about the information base. But you know what broke our heart? We were in some of the South Georgia systems. They don't have the bandwidth to use it. They have to go home. Or that principal, where was it in John, that said that she goes to the crossroads and parks in her car where she can get the bandwidth. That's sad, people. So we need to work on that, Kelly. That's technology is critical, and we're in the dark ages in some of the areas there. Did you know that 100 plus of the systems are smaller than one of the metropolitan high schools? Can you imagine? We met one system that had 400 students, K-12. Had one superintendent. She was the bus driver and everything else, custodian and all. It's unreal what we found in some of those areas. They praised the equalization. They praised the austerity. They praised want us to keep that up, sparsity grants to help those out. And that's why I encourage the governor in the next year to really look at how we're funding. QBE, people, hasn't been updated. We need to look at it. No one said it was wrong. They said, let's fix it. Let's look at how to help those other systems. I think something that was really great that came out of these, I want to summarize and we'll get to your questions. Common Core. Now, I want to tell you, Common Core is a discussion everywhere. We had a group of people that followed us, Lindsay, to every one of them, the same people everywhere. We had the anti, we had the pro. 100% of the superintendents, with the exception of one, he was for it, just wanted us to look at some of the standards, said, let's keep it. We've gone too far. They're standards. That's what they are. All of Georgia's standards are in there. We need to correct them. We need to look at them. We need to revise them where they need to be. We've spent 3 years getting ready. We've spent millions of dollars. You want to hurt teacher morale? Even the teacher said that unanimously. Don't make us start all over. Change it every time we do something different. Let's steady the course for a while. Then we had the anti. No, it's bad. We need to look at it, and we'll talk about that. I'm sure you'll have some questions about that. We had the career pathways. They liked that, the new career pathways. They concerned about enough advisors to advise the students doing that. They liked that. No unfunded mandates, they said. They said, when you pass legislation, what's it going to do to us? Let's look at that. With health care, and those are just some of the things it said. But I think that most of our South Georgia counties could not survive without the RESAs. You all know what that is, the Metropolitan Service Agencies help them out. They said they could not survive without that. And I want to close my part by saying, I'm just glad to be with you. How many of you know Mr. Murphy from the Gwinnett Post? Anybody ever heard of him, the editor up there? He spoke at a Rotary Club the other day, and he was talking about reporting of the future. And he was saying, you know, reporters used to get the story, you had time to look at it, analyze it, and talk to the reporter about it, and then it appeared in the paper the next day. He said, and it's happening right here. I noticed you doing it. Maureen, I see you doing it, baby. It's happening right now. But he said, you're in the news immediately. I mean, as you speak, it's out there. So people, it's out there right now. So let's get it going. You have a tough job. It's your job to keep it right, keep it correct, and we want to work with you. And and when I summarize, I'm going to give a charge to you and ask for some volunteers to help with a good project we've got. Thank you so much for having us with you. So I guess questions, is that it? So
And just open it up, direct your questions to anybody.
please stand up, tell us where you're from. And
Hi, Michelle Worth, WABE. Want to know what Senator and Representative, Senator Representative, what do you both think about the Common Core as of right now? How do you feel about it? Do we need to, do you stay the course or withdraw?
You're talking about the standards.
The standards,
Oh.
yeah.
I've had a great deal of skepticism about it because I'm always skeptical when the federal government starts going into an area that should be in the state domain. But when you look at the history of it, you see that the standards or the initiation for the creation of the standards was done, that came out of the governor's conference, and really the federal intervention and intrusion in it never really came until the race for the top funds came down, and that's when the federal government really got co-opted into it. That's why I say I believe the governor was correct in withdrawing from the testing consortium. I think in terms of management of an education process, you have got to have standards. You've got to have comparisons to know how you're doing comparatively with the top-ranked districts in the United States and internationally. As far as withdrawing from Common Core, personally, I'm not sure whether the local districts can afford to do that. It would be my estimate, it'll take between $150 and $200 million if you were to do across-the-board curriculum adoption in both English and language arts. It may be more economical to take the course, I believe it is, to take the course that the governor has chosen to review the standards, and if they're deficient, tweak them and come out with a modified or an enhanced set of standards that Georgia will live by. If the federal government's got a problem with us doing that, then I think we may have to go to our own standards. But I think we always ought to maintain sovereignty over our standards. As to whether it's going to pass or fail, I think it's probably a political issue. Some parts of the state, it's a non-issue, judging from the feedback that we got in our listening tours. I think in North Georgia, it's more of an issue than it is in Middle and South Georgia. It will remain to be seen. I think we have to have an education system that's affordable and works. And as Chairman Coleman said, one of the great concerns that the local boards of education and the superintendents have said, if we have another change, what are we going to change to? What's the cost of transition going to be? And what is the time value cost in doing the conversion? So I think if the standards, short answer after the long one, if the standards can be tweaked and get to the point that we're comfortable that they're the most rigorous standards that we can adopt, then I think that's fine. We can leave them as they are. And we can do that if we maintain our own sovereignty.
yeah, and you know, I want to say that where we heard the most concern was in math. And you know, I got to realize we've moved from a integrated math. You remember the problem we had there, and some of the systems are just finishing that. We talked to a couple of systems that have that now in the 11th and 12th grade. They're allowing their students to complete that back to traditional whatsoever. And we know there's some deficiencies. Barbara Hampton with the state board is where it does a magnificent job explaining and how they're looking at the math standards. I think there's some gaps, there's some overlaps. But when we realized that probably when Sonny Perdue was governor, where it even started out in Peachtree High School, you know, years ago when they started talking about this with some southern governors. But I think if we tweak it, look at it, and correct where we should, I think, like Lindsay, I don't want to just repeat what he said, but we're talking about a tremendous cost if we look at it. If we tried to change everything right away. But it's the teachers, you talk to them. What's so interesting, most of the time their concerns were curriculum, not standards. The standard is the what, the curriculum is the how. We remember we were in South Georgia, and this group got up just furious about reading material that they were forced to read. And you remember it was Rosa Parks, they were very upset. And this superintendent said they were saying that Washington had forced that. No, the superintendent said, that was my decision. She said, my system is 98% African American, and we wanted to use that. That was perfect for our standards. That's why we chose that. Washington didn't make us do that. So curriculum is a local decision. We need to leave it that way. So thank you. Yeah. Other question? I mean, push that one as far as you want to push it.
And I'm not sure who's going to answer this. There's a candidate for superintendent, and on her platform is to not take one dime of federal money and therefore not be beholden to the federal government. I believe Texas may be doing that. Just curious, I mean, if we got rid of, it's a very small percentage of our overall education budget, how would you feel? Would you support not taking any federal money and going on your own?
You know, that's an interesting question. I had that the other morning. I was at a meeting, and that person you're talking about was there. And this question was asked, said, well, are we going to stop feeding the children because 99% of our lunch money is federal? Are we going to, we're going to do away with the breakfast program, lunch? I mean, I'm just saying, and we could do that, but, I've heard that option mentioned several times. And special ed, millions of dollars from the special ed program. And people are not aware, we're right now looking at the special ed program, the BD, the LD, and it's growing tremendous, it's a tremendous growth. And of course, a lot of that are federal mandates that require a lot, and of course, a lot of federal money there. So you're looking at two tremendous programs there that would be immediately affected. And legally, that's another thing. You could maybe refuse it, but what were you going to legally be able to do with the special ed or feeding children, some of those things.
So it would be a difficult, so basically
I'm not saying
you're not.
It can be done, yes, but what are you going to do with those mandates to do and pick that money up?
One interesting aspect of the Supreme Court decision on the Affordable Care Act is that the Supreme Court said, the requirement was going to be if you did not expand Medicaid, they were going to take away all of the Medicaid funding. That was the threat. And they said that's an abuse of the spending authority in the Constitution. Many legal scholars have looked at similar issues in education, such as Title I or other title programs, and has indicated if that decision is applied appropriately to education, that would mean the federal government could not enforce those strings.
That's right.
And pull a large amount of money away. So some of those concerns have been rectified by the Supreme Court's decision.
I think it's probably a correct statement to say usually in the M&O budget, the federal portion and participation is relatively small, but when you get into the title program, you're talking about considerably more money, and most of the districts handle that outside of the M&O budget. The special ed would be the funding for that is tremendously expensive in terms of what it costs to educate a special ed student. About 3.5, on average, about 3.5 or 400% of what it does of a regular ed student. And I know in most of the districts now, they're running from 10 to 15% of their students who receive these services. It's extremely expensive to carry on these services.
But the vast majority of those funds are also local.
No, the vast majority of special ed, I believe,
is
is federal.
A lot of federal. We receive a lot. What's our time? I want to.
You have 7 more minutes.
That's why I want. Yeah.
We'll wrap up.
All right. Other questions and other topics, probably. Yeah.
Hi, Christina Cassidy with the.
I don't have my hearing aid in, so speak up.
Sorry, Christina Cassidy with the Associated Press. It sounds like the conversation is going to be mostly focused on trying to restore some of the funding and not necessarily tweak QBE during this legislative session. We're staring at a $1 billion gap there between what's sort of recommended under QBE and what the state has done. So if you could tell me a little bit about how much you think we'll be able to get closer to a situation where there are more school districts, meeting the 180-day state minimum, and fewer teacher furloughs.
I felt so good when we met with some of these superintendents. Lynn, you remember, we were down in some of the South Georgia counties, and the guy from Augusta especially, he said, let me tell you, we were a little fat. He said, I don't think we need to put the whole, billion back. He said, but somewhere between, he said, I don't know if it's 100 million, I don't know if it's 300 million, I don't know if it's 500 million. But he said, the new reality is somewhere between. And he said there was a lot of fat, but he said we're cutting bone now. And so to answer your question, that's what the governor's proposed, when we look at this highway fund. But what bothered me more than that was when I found that one of the systems down in down near the Augusta area, remember she said 1 mill generated $33,000 a month where let's say in Cobb, 1 mill generated what was 10 million, and they were saying that they don't have a Walmart, and they said they would like to see the sales tax distributed by zip code, you know, something like that. So when you look at those things, I think the issue is how to help those systems. We've got to look at how to really help those poor systems. We had 19 systems that are on the verge of bankruptcy, you know, because of the... And another thing that distressed us, we found, you know, you can go up to 20 mills. I had no sympathy for that system that said, we're hurting, but we're charging, 12 and a half or 13 mills, when we're saying, well, up here in the metro area, we're at 19 and 20 mills, some 25. Let's tax yourself. You've got to have the pain, no gain. So yeah, does that answer your question? So it's somewhere there. I don't know where it is. We need to find out.
Do you feel confident that there's going to be enough of a desire at the legislature to put that money towards education to make sure that we're lifting up as many of those school districts as possible?
I'll just tell you, Lindsay can speak for himself. The $1 billion, no, but somewhere in between, yes.
I think we'd be careful to
Yeah.
focus so much on the $1 billion
There you
number.
go.
Because this is a formula that was designed when I was in high school, 1985, and everyone agrees is outdated
Nothing
and antiquated. So I don't know why we keep looking at
Yeah.
that. So are schools underfunded right now after the recession? Absolutely. I think there are a lot of situations, some more than others. You also look at administrative spending versus money going to teachers. I mean, there are a lot of other factors. That's why we need to focus, this aid that we can give them, because next year, when we get to reforming the funding formula, if you put more money in this antiquated system, it's going to make reform that much harder politically. Sort of like tax reform, revenue neutral tax reform, there are winners and losers. Same thing with education funding reform. So that's something that the legislators have to balance this year.
Well, one thing that bothers me is I've heard some of my colleagues say, and this is at the point of $1 billion austerity cut. They said, well, this is the new normal in the schools. We need to just get used to it. The bottom line is, if we get used to this, the schools will starve to death.
They're gonna
The
die.
only way they're surviving right now is because they've gone to shortened calendars and larger class sizes, none of which I don't believe are good academically. I think what we need to do is take a different approach at it, make a valid determination of what the cost to well-educated child in the state of Georgia is. When we make that cost determination, then fund to that level, but you also then have safeguards to make sure that there's efficiencies and that people are doing the job academically that they need to be doing.
The accountability.
Academic performance. Just to pick an arbitrary number and say this is what we're going to fund to, I think it'd be a mistake, but we need to really look at what true costs are.
Yeah.
But looking at other states, if you look at Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, some states that on NAEP scores and graduation rates have done better than we have, we're spending more than all of them, according to the most recent per pupil expenditures. So not saying that what we're spending is correct, but you have to give some context to evaluate some of these spending.
One thing we found, this shocked us. We have, what was it? They said they have eliminated, teaching, there's no jobs available. The reason is, they eliminated, was over 3,000 teaching. I can't remember how many teachers have been eliminated through these austerity cuts because, let's take Gwinnett, for example. One additional child added to every classroom would keep them from having to hire a couple of hundred teachers. But what it's done is put 24 students in that first grade class. So, I'm like you, we need to look at what's the best way to do it. The flexibility is the only way they've survived. Absolutely. Flexibility with funding, class sizes, the three ways: salaries, and and expenditure control and class sizes. One thing that they talked about too. Suppose we want to teach a journalism class in one of our schools. Why do we need to go hire a full-time teacher, pay them a salary? Why don't we hire one of you, you have an education, you're the specialist in an area, let you come in and teach one day. You don't have to have a teaching certificate, but pay you, give you a salary, don't have to pay benefits. Same thing with a physics teacher, whatever. We're looking at things like that. That's how some of them have survived. Right, Kelly? Other question? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Carolyn Matthews from Cherokee Ledger News. Just for any of you, they've already cut to the bone, so here they need more funding. What do y'all think about the SPLOST situation? Like if maybe they can take some of that capital funding and use it for M&O, or also, a lot of times with economic incentives, these big businesses that come in, they don't have to pay property taxes, and then the schools don't see the profit off that. How, do you think that that pays for itself in the new jobs, or?
Well, in terms of modifying the e-splosh as we have it now, which is only dedicated toward capital projects, I believe that you enhance the availability of tools for the local district, because there's not one solution that's gonna work for all the districts. If you take, I mean, this is a generalization, but you take a county that does not have a Walmart, and the sales tax is not gonna help them a great deal. I think your more urban counties that you have a good sales tax return, they probably need the ability to use some of that funding for M&O. And the reason is, I think sometimes they feel like they're forced to build out a capital projects list in a splost initiative, and sometimes the maintenance cost of these going forward, they'd be better off to reallocate some of those funds to current M&O needs. That's my personal opinion, and I think if we open that law, we ought to open it to the fullest extent to give the local boards of education the ability to put before the voters whichever solution meets their local situation the best.
Yes, sir.
We've talked a lot about funding for education, and I guess the choice comes down to either taking it from another part of the budget or raising taxes. And is that decision solely the purview of the governor, or would the legislature ever take the lead in doing things any different than what he proposes?
Brooks been there 22 years, I guess that better know.
It would be very difficult. You know, on our listening session, exactly what you said was proposed. So almost every session, they say, you know, why don't you in the legislature just go ahead and let's propose another penny sales tax statewide and distribute it out, you know, by zip code. They give us all kinds of, you know, exotic ways. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I think the appetite right now, and I think we agree, Lindsay, that it's just not there for something like that. Look what just happened with the T-Splosh, you know, and so I think that, but I think we need to give the locals as many options as they can have with, and what was refreshing to me with those 10 systems that had the option to do that, how well they were doing versus the ones that didn't have it. So
There was a guy by the name of Tom Murphy that came up with this idea a while back, that was it 2 or 3 pennies?
That was it.
I think 2 or 3 penny increase in state tax to eliminate property tax funding of education.
I remember.
So you had the tax increase at the state level, but that was good politics at the local level to get rid of property tax funding, which is usually 60% of your property tax bill. I don't know if something like that would ever go, but it's been proposed before.
And it's out there now. It was proposed in our hearings.
But if you did that on a local basis, I mean, we've got the local fair share now, but I think if you said you've got 3 cents that goes totally to education, I think you'd see the state pretty much take over control of all the funding and allocate the funding ever how they felt like, and you'd have very little local control over your local programs unless you had additional funding sources locally. But if you did it all statewide and did away the property tax, because basically the property tax is the county funding piece. But and it's a question of how much autonomy do you want over part of the funds. And I think you need to be careful what you ask for. You may get it.
You know, one thing that they said over and over again on this flexibility and accountability. 2015, you need to realize right now, there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom out there for the school system, because in order to survive, the legislature allowed increased class sizes, expenditure control, flexibility of salaries, a lot of different things. But by 2015, they're supposed to choose I-square, you've heard that one, that's the flexibility control. You've heard the charter systems, don't confuse it with charter schools. You've heard them talk about the status quo. They want a superintendent out there that liked the word status quo. Said nobody wants to be status quo. And most of them, if you've seen, they've actually done well. Most systems are doing better. They said, you know, call us strategic systems or whatever. But they want more options for flexibility. Many of them said, if we're doing well, leave us alone. Let us go. Hold us accountable. Not one system said we don't want to be accountable, but give us the flexibility, hold us accountable, and do. And they're saying, you take some of these freedoms away, or we're going under. That's what scared us, wasn't it?
But going back to your question about raising taxes, what are you going to do? I think as a legislator, you have to look at the aspect, and, you know, the Bible says, wherever your heart is, that's where your money's gonna be too. I'm all for economic development, absolutely, because if you don't have a vibrant economic growth in the state, you're not gonna have a strong funding mechanism. But I do believe this, education is probably the strongest component that we have as to drawing businesses to the state of Georgia. Most businesses are concerned, they want to go to an area that has strong public education. And to do that, we have to realize we've got to fund it to be able to deliver it. And to do that, I think as a state, we have to set priorities in our spending and make a determination what's absolutely the most important area that we have to fund. And we have costs that are built in, we have very little control over. But in the discretionary funding and also in the funding increases, and I'll say this, the state revenues percentage-wise have increased more than what the local funding tax digest have in the last 5 years. I mean, they've recovered at a better percentage rate. But I think we have to make a determination what's really the most important and what will do the most to move the ball economically in economic development. And I believe education will do it.
I do. And I'm gonna have to say, sum it up, we are not funding where we should be. I mean, that's the way I feel. We've got to do some more. Where it is, we need to find out in this study. I see we've been, what do you want us to do, sum up? You want to start and then just sum up?
No, I've started last
You've already summed up. You've summed up. You want to sum up? I'm going to sum up with something. I want to give you something. I read something the other day. How many of you have ever read this? The Dash? I'm going to leave this with you, and I want you to take this to heart. This poem has changed my life. Linda Ellis, who lives in Marietta, wrote this poem. If you ever get a chance to meet her, she is a God-sent one. She is a great lady, and she wrote this. And this poem, if you ever look at a tombstone, it says, the birth, dash, the death. I want you to listen to this, only 19 lines, and I want to leave you with it. And I want you to live your life this way, people, because as a reporter, you have an obligation. You have an obligation to yourself and to your family. Because I'm going to tell you, to a child, to a person, love it is spelled T-I-M-E, time. The time he gives. Just listen to this, and I want to sum it up. I want you to go this. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of her birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved her know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters most is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel, be less quick to anger, show appreciation more, and love the people in your life like you've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogies are being read and your life actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? People, you're lucky. You got a long dash left. Live it right. Tell your children you love them, your family you love them, people you love them, work with them. And I wish you the best. And may you have a long dash, a wonderful life, and a great new year. Thanks for having us with you. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Are you going to follow that or just?
I don't think we can follow that.
Yeah, let's go.
All I'll say is this, we welcome the media.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of the media. I've been in elective office for 15 years. They've always treated me fairly, and I've always tried to give them a straight answer. And if you've got a question, you call me anytime, and I'll try to answer it for you.
And I'll give you my cell phone. Now this, I want you to do this. Give to Steve right now. I want 7 of you, or 8 of you, 10, to give him your name. You're going to be called next week. And I'm bringing you into the Capitol. Lindsay and I are going to meet with you, and I'm bringing in 2 or 3 more. And we're going to listen to you. What did you hear at those sessions? What have you heard, and what do you think? I know one of the reporters said, we can't make suggestions. Bull, you're a human being, you're a voter, you can make some suggestions. I'm not telling you how to fix
Off
it.
the
But
record,
I want you,
right.
off the record, baby, I ain't printing a thing. But I'll leave your computers at the door. But I'm serious, I would like, but don't let them leave. I want 5 or 6 names, and you will be called next week, and there will be about a couple-hour session with us, and we want to hear from you. We really do. We appreciate you. Right, Lindsay?
Thank you, Tom.
Amen. Thank y'all.
Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. So before you leave today, I told Brooks when he said, did I think any of you do that? I go, oh yes. There are a lot of people here who are not bashful. So let me get some cards from some of you and we'll hook you up next week to go over to the Capitol. All right, last session, and also one of the most popular ones. It's interesting that we were just talking about some of the issues that made me remember that Georgia has 4 or 5 of the important pieces in place now that all the other successful states have. That's a strong accountability system, strong standards, a good curriculum, student information system that Kelly mentioned, and good leadership training. I have to compliment our superintendent, our state superintendent, for helping to put those things together. But like these gentlemen said, we don't have the results yet in all the areas that we want, but we're getting better. Our data system is being recognized nationally. Data Quality Campaign says it's one of the best in the country. The Fordham Institute says we get an A- on our standards. We just heard last week, it was mentioned earlier this morning, the quality counts ranked us 17th among other states. Now, as you get into that data, you'll realize that the grades they gave us on other dimensions were 3 C's, 2 B's, and an A. Kind of sounds like my high school report card. But we are doing better in some areas, but we still have work to go. So Superintendent Barge is going to be with us to talk a little bit about where we are and where he sees us going, and of course he's going to give a lot of time to you also for Q&A. Superintendent Barge?
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you all again. I could make all kinds of jokes about being last, and but you know, hopefully you will stay awake. I want to share with you several things. I'm not sure what all you heard this morning about the latest quality counts study. I do want to highlight some of that information because that is the most recent information that we have on, I guess, considering an outside assessment of Georgia's educational system. As you know, Ed Week does this study every year. They have for the last 5 years. One thing they did differently this year, in the past, they look at, when they study the systems, they look at over 100 different indicators grouped into the 6 categories that you heard Steve mention the grades that we received. When you look at the indicators in each of those, there are over 100 different indicators that they look at in this study. It's everything from policies that the state has to standards to actual student outcomes. There are a number of rating systems out there that don't even include student outcomes. So I caution folks about looking at what they're assessing. So one thing that they did not do this year that they have done in the past is take all of the grades on all of those indicators and roll them up into a single report card grade for the state system and rank that state and rank the states. They did not rank them this year. As you know, over the last 2 years, for the last 2 consecutive years, they've ranked the quality of Georgia's educational system 7th in the nation based on all of that. So the student achievement piece is what we will be focusing on somewhat today. I'll mention some others because they tend to be more policy oriented, but I do want you to know about the student achievement piece. As Steve said, the report does have Georgia ranked 17th in the nation in overall student achievement. I think what is important to know about how they came up with that ranking is they're not just looking at overall performance. As Kelly had mentioned earlier, we're focusing on growth as a state as well. We're not just holding systems accountable for performance, we're holding them accountable for growth. Well, this particular study, states were given grades on overall achievement. They were given grades for growth, student growth, over a 10-year period from 2003 to 2013. They were given credit for closing the poverty gap between students of poverty and students of non-poverty. And so when you look at all of those, I want to highlight some successes for Georgia. Again, 17th overall. Only one other state in the Southeast scored higher than Georgia, ranked higher than Georgia, and that was Florida. Their score was about a 75, and Georgia's was a little over 70. So we're fairly close in actual numerical grade. Now, they did look at the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 4th and 8th grade reading and math. They looked at again, the performance. They looked at the 10-year growth in each of those. They looked at poverty gap closure. They looked at graduation rates and the 10-year growth of the states and graduation rates. And they looked at advanced placement exams, not only in performance, but in 10-year growth. So as noted in the press release yesterday, here are the highlights. We ranked 5th in the nation on 10-year achievement gains for 4th grade reading on the NAEP. So a lot of folks may say, well, we're not performing. I think we actually met national average this year on 4th grade reading, but Georgia is receiving high marks for making gains over that 10-year period. So again, ranked 5th in the nation on 10-year achievement gains for 4th grade reading, ranked 5th in the nation on the poverty gap closure for 8th grade mathematics on the NAEP, ranked 10th in the nation for the 10-year increase in high school graduation rates, ranked 5th in the nation in advanced placement scores, the growth in advanced placement scores, and overall ranked 9th in the nation in the percentage of our students passing advanced placement exams and earning college credit while still in high school. For the second consecutive year, Georgia was also ranked 1st in the nation with a score of 100 in the transitions and alignment category in the Quality Count study. That score comes from the state enacting 14 policies examined by Ed Week, including curriculum alignment from pre-kindergarten through college and programs to help students not meeting school readiness benchmarks. In the report, Georgia also ranked 18th in the nation and received an A- for standards, assessment, and accountability. This section of the report looks at each state's academic standards in English language arts, math, science, and social studies. Georgia actually received a perfect score of 100 for standards compared to the national average of 87.3. Another section where Georgia performed well was in the teaching profession. That's one of the 6 categories. Georgia ranked 10th in the nation in its efforts to improve teacher quality. Now, as you can tell, things are a little bit better than the perception that most people have about Georgia's public education system. As I've always said and will continue to say, do we have room to grow? Absolutely. We are not where we need to be, but we're headed in the right direction. Now, one of the areas in the report where we did not fare too well, and you've heard that discussed extensively in the last session, was in the area they classify as school finance analysis, especially in the subcategory of per pupil expenditures. We ranked 40th in the nation, over $2,000 per pupil below the national average. Now, please don't hear me say that spending more money is necessarily the answer. But as you heard from our representatives and our senators, our schools are starving in many of our districts. And because of the increase in poverty in this state and in the increase in our students who are living in poverty, over approximately 60% of our student population in Georgia participates in the free and reduced lunch program. It's a heavier lift. Poverty is not an excuse for underachievement, but it is a heavier lift. Many times it takes different resources, it takes additional resources when you consider students coming to school in a variety of ranges of preparation for school. So sometimes it takes different resources, additional resources. It takes additional time for us to catch students up to where they need to be. In this Quality Counts report, there is also something called a Chance for Success Index, which is based on multiple indicators, including family income. Georgia ranked 44th in the nation in family income. This is getting, again, back to the poverty issue. Parental education, we ranked 38th in the nation, and that's defined as at least one parent in the home having a minimum of a bachelor's degree. Parental employment, at least one parent having a full-time job, 40th in the nation. And as you all, if you read Tom Crawford's article last week, as I did, or it may have been a week before last, I don't know, my days kind of run together now. While we have had an increase in the number of jobs created in this state, we have seen a significant rise in the number of people in our state living in poverty. Poverty has a significant impact on our educational system. Again, it is not an excuse, and we are meeting that challenge head on, but we have to fund education appropriately. Now, Georgia is below the national average in all of those areas that I just mentioned. Overall, Georgia ranks 38th in the nation for the chance of student success. That sort of coincides, if you remember the kids count. It's a similar study, but it's released every year. And in the 2013 kids count report, Georgia actually slipped in its rankings from 36th in the nation to 43rd when it comes to our children. So lots of indicators there that point to poverty in our schools and the chance for success. Now, there is good news there in what we're doing educationally and what I've already mentioned to you, that we were recognized in the report, specifically in the area of 8th grade mathematics, of closing the achievement gap with our students of poverty. Again, we have a lot to do. There are a lot of other areas out there that we need to continue to work on. But again, I think we're heading in the right direction. Now, some of you are familiar with a letter that I released last week, and I'm going to point out some things from that because it goes right in step with what the gentleman spoke about earlier, our senator and our representative, and I was so very glad to hear their remarks. But I spent some time back before Christmas visiting schools in the southern part of our state, and I was, in some cases, very impressed by what I saw from teachers and from achievement gains that schools are making to being very frustrated and in some cases angry at the conditions that the students were attending school in. Now, we have heard a lot of cries about the dire situation of the state budget, the state economy, and I appreciate Senator Tippins and his comments about we have to make a decision. What is the most important thing for us to invest in? Austerity cuts began in 2003. Districts have not been receiving what they have earned since 2003. Over $7 billion to date when you include this year's. We haven't seen the budget this year, but I'm sure we will go over $8 billion. Now, understand, too, that the state funding formula was written 30 years ago, implemented 29 years ago, and the funding levels haven't changed as far as the rate of funding. So, for example, when QBE was implemented in 1985, we were paying districts for substitute teachers somewhere in the neighborhood of $16 to $18 a day for a substitute teacher. 2014, we're paying districts $16 to $18 a day for a sub. That hasn't changed. That's what, when I say that we're not funding at the same rates, we've never adjusted this formula for inflation. Never. And so, what's happening to local districts and why they are hurting so much is that cost of that sub, the average, I'm basing this on my experience from different school districts, so this is not a scientific average, but based on my experience working in school districts around the area, the going rate for a sub is about $65 a day. The state is paying the districts about $18 for that sub, okay? That's a big difference. And when you go to textbooks, it's the same issue. We're funding them, we're giving them money for textbooks based on the prices of textbooks nearly 30 years ago. That's why a number of districts aren't buying textbooks. They simply can't afford it. And when we talk about giving districts flexibility, many of those items used to, well, they're in that QBE, and districts have flexibility on how they use that QBE. So many of them now are using the money that they might have used for textbooks to pay teacher salaries, to keep teachers employed. So there are a number of reasons why districts may not be using textbooks or purchasing textbooks. So giving the conditions, that I mean, I was in schools that they turned the lights off in the hall all day, but just to save money on the power bill. Schools that were carpeted, that it was gone. I mean, you saw the seams, but the carpet was pretty much gone. Water fountains that obviously had been, I guess, that broke, that were removed from the walls rather than being fixed. There are some serious conditions in our schools. And the fact that our teachers in this state have been able to move the needle on student achievement as much as they have, to me, is nothing short of miraculous. In addition to what I've told you at the beginning, currently, Georgia ranks higher than it ever has in its state history in SAT scores, ACT scores, advanced placement test scores, and we are graduating more seniors than we ever have in state history, with increased expectations. There are only 7 states in the country. A lot of people talk about grad rates, guys. There are only 7 states in the country that have as equal, or there's only one state in the country that has a higher number of units of credit to earn a high school diploma than Georgia does. Georgia is the only state in the nation that requires its students to have 4 units of science. Well, let me take that back. When you look at the 7 states who the college prep diploma is the default diploma for all children, Georgia is the only one of those 7 that requires 4 units of science to graduate. Many don't require 4 units of math. So the expectations, even while we've raised expectations of our students, we're still raising the number of students who are graduating, which is, in my opinion, very much a success. My concern, and many folks say, well, if you're doing so well, why does funding matter? Well, when you look at, and you heard some of the folks talk about the instructional calendars, we have a handful of districts, 4 or 5 in the state, that are below 150 days this year. 144 days, 146 days. Y'all, that's nearly 2 months of lost instructional time for those students. That will have a significant impact on the students in those districts. We have to prioritize educational spending, especially in our most rural districts, because what message are we sending to those students? What message are we sending to them? You're not as important? You don't count as much as kids in Metro Atlanta? We have to prioritize our spending. As you've heard, teachers have been laid off. Over 4,000 teachers in the last several years have lost their jobs in the state of Georgia. Class sizes are larger. Programs in a lot of these districts, like art and music, have been cut out completely. Teachers have been furloughed. Over 90% of teachers, I know you heard from the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, they recently did a survey. About 90% of our districts responded to their survey. 80% of those responding, over 80% of those responding, have furloughed teachers in order to meet budget. A lot of people will point the finger, in that particular case, to bloated central offices and administrations. That may be the case in isolated situations, but in most of our districts, it absolutely is not. We actually have 12 of our school districts in this state right now that are operating with a 49% superintendent. They're being paid less than 20 hours a week. We have a handful of districts, of these small ones, that the superintendent is also the high school principal. It's one and the same. I'm going to skip through some of this. They alluded, again, our legislators alluded to this a little bit earlier. It is, a lot of people have, they've taken on the mantra that it shouldn't matter where your zip code is. Every child in the state requires a quality education. What we need to realize is that costs money. And in some cases, it costs more than others, because in some rural districts, they don't have access to the bandwidth that they need for the students. There are extremely dedicated teachers in these schools. Are there some that aren't? Absolutely, just like any profession. You know reporters that aren't as dedicated as you, okay? That happens in any profession. But these teachers are doing the best they can. I literally saw textbooks duct taped together. Duct tape. Because, and these books are over 15 years old. And this may be a stretch, but I believe that there are people that would like nothing more than to see the public education system fail. And if it's a strategy to do that by not funding it, to then be able to point a finger and say you're not being successful and therefore we have to privatize, that would be doing a lot of our children in this state a tremendous disservice. Because I think you know as well as I do that there are not many for-profit companies or private schools that are going to go into the rural parts of our state and educate the children. Many of them will not. They're just not, it's not profitable. It's too small. But every one of those children counts. I saw in one of these schools a child that was 9 years old. Principal was walking down the hall with me, and the child, we're walking behind this child. She's obviously on a handmade kind of walker made out of PVC pipe. She's blind. She's walking with her teacher. And he said, when she came to this school, she didn't walk. Both of her parents are deceased. And she's 9 years old. Thank God for that school and those teachers. There was another young man, we went into a classroom and he asked, he was highlighting some kids and we left and he said, the young man that stood up, both of his parents have abandoned him. He lives by himself in a trailer and the football coach is the only reason he comes to school. A lot of folks aren't going to invest in those children, but we've got some extremely dedicated teachers who are. These stories are repeated in every school in this state, even in urban and suburban areas. As these gentlemen had alluded to, we need to invest in education. 2012, there was a promise made in the budget to end teacher furloughs. That hasn't happened. We need to end teacher furloughs. A pay raise would be nice, but as you heard them say earlier, what teachers want more than the raise is the restoration of austerity to end their furloughs. If we shortchange our children now, we will greatly pay for it in the future. Doing the right thing isn't usually complicated. It's sometimes costly, but it's not complicated. We know that the right thing is to appropriately fund our schools. It may be costly, but it's not complicated. What will be even more costly is the adverse impact on our students if they aren't prepared for the world that awaits them. Now, most of you know that I decided not to run again for state superintendent. And it's no secret that I'm running for governor instead. And the reason that I am doing that is I feel like that is the office from which I can make the greatest impact in my mind on the single most important investment that this state can make, and that's education. Because education, we want to get at poverty, education is the way to break poverty cycles. Now, let me talk briefly about Common Core and assessments, and then I will take some questions. How am I doing on time?
Yeah, until 2:40.
Okay, all right, good. Let me talk briefly about Common Core assessments, and then I'll take a couple of questions. Back in the summer, I began work with our RESA districts to conduct a survey of our educators across the state of year one implementation of the Common Core. Anytime that you embark on a huge initiative such as Common Core, you always do a review of implementation. Just like you heard Matt talk about the College and Career Ready Performance Index, we did a review after year one implementation and we made some adjustments, we made some refinements. That was the same thing, that was the same thinking that I had when I asked the RESAs to conduct a survey of our teachers across the state. I wanted them in every school in the state. I wanted to know what teachers thought. They are the ones who are implementing the standards. They're the ones that are seeing students perform and get their feedback and their opinion on year one implementation. What went well, what didn't go well, are there refinements that need to be made, or are there adjustments that need to be made? After that, the governor in the fall asked that the state board do a review of the Common Core standards, which they are going to take this as part of that review. They're also doing some other things. They're being required to hold some hearings in their districts that they represent on the Common Core, and those things are planned. They're supposed to put together a panel of experts to compare the previous Georgia Performance Standards with the Common Core standards, and all of that will be rolled together. I can tell you that based on what I've seen of the over 11,000 responses that we received from teachers across the state, over 80% of our teachers in the state are in favor of keeping the standards. They like the standards, they want to keep them. There are recommendations for refinements, and that's exactly what I wanted to see. I wanted to know from our teachers. I can look at English standards, but I can't tell you about math standards. I taught English. So I need to know from my math teachers what's going on. So there are some solid recommendations, I think, in there that we probably need to look at, and we will bring those together with the other information that the board may, I guess, accumulate in their discussions across the state. And if there is a need for recommendations for refinement, I'll make those recommendations for refinement. There are people that say the standards are copyrighted. You can't do that. If we make refinements to the standard and they're no longer completely aligned to the Common Core, we'll have the College and Career Ready Georgia Performance Standards, and we won't call it the Common Core. You can't copyright a standard that a student shall be able to multiply 2 times 2. I mean, that's so. Our teachers are in favor of the standards. We're not making any recommendations for pulling out of the standards. There probably will be some suggestions for refinements, but again, guys, those will be refinements. They won't be anything that will, they'll only be meant to improve what we have. It won't be anything significant that would require any type of training of teachers or anything like that. Just simple refinements, clarifications, and those types of things. And as far as the assessments, I will tell you where we are at this point. We have, my assessment director has been working for the last couple of months in conjunction with other states, working on an RFP that we will release, expected to release sometime this month for our new assessment system. I will tell you that in 2015, we will not have the CRCT, and we will, we will have end of course tests, but they won't be the same, okay? What we are looking for in our RFP is a single aligned testing system. The CRCT is completely different than the EOCT. They don't align. So what we're looking for are tests that align vertically 3 through 12. A lot of folks say, and I agree, we test too much. A lot of that testing is driven by the federal government. We can't change that. We have to test every grade level 3 through 8 in English, language arts, and mathematics. There's not a state superintendent out there that I know that's in favor of that model. Most would like to do that in gateway years and let each state measure its own student progress in between. But that's not happening. There is no interest at the federal level of changing that. In fact, when we submitted our waiver for No Child Left Behind, we had to include testing at grades 3 through 8. So that's driven by the government, or the federal government. Now, when I say that we will not have the CRCT, whatever tests that we use for federal accountability have to be approved by the U.S. Department of Education. It goes through a peer review process. If it doesn't pass peer review, you can't use it. So their standards are changing. So the test that we currently have won't meet the standard for 15. We have to change our test. It will be PARCC-like in its design, in that there are some expectations that we have constructed response items, so that it's no longer an all multiple choice test. Students will have to explain work. They will have to give reasons. They would have to, let's say, cite evidence for their answers. One of the things that we do plan on doing, though, by embedding the constructed response items within the test, we will be able to eliminate some of our state testing that we do. So for example, the requirement that we have a writing test at grades 3, 5, and 8. We'll be recommending to the legislature, I guess, elimination of that, because we will be able to generate writing scores from the constructed response items in the new tests. That will help us streamline our testing. And then we will also be combining the English language arts. Currently, we have separate tests in English language arts and reading. Those will be combined into a single test. So in the new design, we're anticipating at least 4 fewer state tests for our students in the state. And lastly, on assessments, we do have a challenge in the time frame, as you noted in the top 10 issues to watch. We're under a really tight time frame. We have been for a couple of years now field testing items aligned to the Common Core. So we have hundreds of those items already that have already been field tested, have validity and reliability established, and can move forward with those. We are working on memorandums of understanding right now with other states such as Florida and Kentucky to share testing items. Kentucky has already implemented some of the, let's say, the constructed response items. They've already been field tested and reliability and validity established. So we can save time by leveraging a partnership with them. So with that, I do want to just say, I want to read this last paragraph and I'll take a couple of questions. This is from Steve's group, and I so appreciate this. Georgia has done a good job in identifying areas of education reform that will lead to increased student outcomes in high school graduates who are ready for college or to embark on a career. Increased rigor and teacher quality are the right foci to produce these changes. However, the same educators are struggling under the increasing burden of being asked to do more with less, with a population of students whose needs are outpacing resources available to help them. By not addressing these issues, Georgia is in danger of not realizing the potential gains this completed puzzle can deliver. And they were highlighting a lot of the good things and the good work that we have going on at the department. So, and that's a completely accurate statement. I am very concerned that even the gains that we have seen, that we'll begin to see those flatline or even decrease because the loss of instructional time over time in our students that are, let's say, are on in districts where they've cut their school calendar. So, thank you very much. I'll take a couple of questions. Yes, Christina.
Do you think the funding formula needs to be changed? Or is it a question of just fully funding it?
Well, the funding formula is complicated. It is, in most regards, a fairly reasonable attempt at establishing a basic education and what it costs, because it does address the needs of, let's say, a low-income student has greater needs, or a special needs student has greater needs, or an English language learner has greater needs than your average high school student. So the weightings are there to make those accommodations, but I think fully funding it would be extremely helpful. Yes?
I know you and the governor have had your differences, and the governor has not released his budget yet, but have you received any assurances that there will be more education funding in his budget?
I've not had any direct conversations with the governor's office about the budget, so I have no idea what it is. I've read in the paper. That's where my information comes from. Anybody else?
Would you have expected, just to follow up on that, I mean, is that unusual? Do you normally meet with the governor before in years past?
No, we haven't normally gotten that heads up. Maureen, you had one question?
Yeah, is there any way, I mean, you will not be, whether it's the governor or not, I can't say, you won't be state school superintendent. Is there anything that, in the next election, the folks running for your office, some of them have fairly radical ideas. Is there any way to, I guess, embed what you want to do, with safeguard it, put it in concrete, so we don't have someone come in and upend all of this? Because it just seems to me that we're in a position now where if one of the extreme folks wins, it'd be very curious to see what they'll do with your legacy.
Well, that's a very good question. And yes, there are some ways that some of these have already been safeguarded. The Career Pathways Initiative is in statute with House Bill 186. The teacher evaluation system is in statute. So those two pieces specifically are safeguarded. The standards, constitutionally, the state board has the authority to adopt standards and curriculum. So that's always going to remain unless the Constitution's changed. So.
When you look at the budget, where you say more funding needs to go into education, but where does that money come from? I mean, are you talking tax increases?
Well, not necessarily, because we saw information today that revenues are up for the last month. We have the reserve fund built up to a pretty safe level. You can begin to use some of those reserve funds without getting into any danger to help offset if you want to restore some austerity. You can, again, prioritize. Look at where we're spending in the state. Do we need to have multiple agencies duplicating the work of other agencies? Can you streamline state government to realize some cost savings? So there's some things that you can do without increasing taxes to help come up with some of that.
But, we're talking, if you're close to $1 billion, or even trying to make a dent in that.
Right.
In these other agencies you're talking about, it's, they're about 30% of the whole state budget. You can consolidate many of them and still not come to.
And you're not going to come up with the resources to restore the full $1 billion. I fully understand that. But you can start somewhere. And in these rural districts where we're talking things are so bad, their austerity cut is less than $1 million. You could restore $800,000 to a district, which is every penny of what they lost last year, and they put their kids back in school 180 days. It's not rocket science. You just gotta.
But can you target it specifically for districts? How do you talk about the disparities in rural Georgia? But can you realistically get that money to them?
Well, I hope so. I don't know legally the ramifications to that, but I would hope that you could, and we attempt that with things like sparsity grants. We attempt that with the equalization grants. But when you have a county like Hancock that doesn't get equalization, there's something wrong.
Well, would that relatively small amount of money be sufficient, or would you still call for more funding?
I think that, again, you could begin, and again, you're not going to be able to restore the full $1 billion. I know that. But it's not going to take that to alleviate some of the pressure. We've got to start somewhere. And if the economy continues on the track that it's on, then over time you can get back to where we were. Yes, sir.
People say over again about the new teacher evaluation system. Yes, we need to be accountable, but there's this big timeline between assessments and actual evaluations of teachers, especially first-year teachers. And also, a lot of people are worried about inconsistency in the SLOs developed all over the place. What do you have to say about those things?
Well, the second part of that will be a little bit easier. The SLO process, Senator Tippins made a comment that I've actually used with the SLO work as well. A lot of folks have asked for us to develop statewide SLOs so that there would be some consistency. But that's one of those things that be careful what you wish for, because in our elective courses, let's take a course like construction, for example, in the CTAE program. There are some construction programs in this state that are industry certified, and because they're industry certified, they are required to teach construction, or they're required to teach carpentry, electrical, masonry, and plumbing. You have some construction programs in the state that aren't industry certified, and they only teach carpentry. So what is taught in these classes varies in the elective courses across the state for different reasons, and to standardize that would be extremely difficult. What we have recommended to our districts is to maybe look at doing some district-wide SLO work so that it's the same within the district, or even regional, especially in rural Georgia. Maybe the entire RESA has a regional type of SLO project. But we do have established at the state level an SLO bank where every district that wants to can submit their SLOs, and we'll keep them on file for other districts to use. The first piece, as far as assessment or evaluation of teachers and the timing of it, it will be offset a little bit in the beginning, but once we have the full longitudinal data system up and running, and we have, let's say, online testing, once we have the bandwidth in place in the state so we can administer our tests online, we'll get our data back quicker, and we'll be able to generate some responses. And, having been a principal, it's, you're going to have that data typically after contracts, but you can have it for the next year going forward. And that's probably not the best situation. But if you're formatively assessing your students throughout the year, rather than just waiting on a summative assessment at the end, then you have a pretty good picture of student achievement. But the teacher effectiveness measure in the end is going to be based on that summative assessment. All right. One more.
Is that me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just curious, the session starts Monday. Are you going to have anything that you're asking for them, any particular legislation?
The only legislation that we'll be asking for at this point is probably going to be cleanup language and legislation that already exists for, let's say, example, assessment, because the assessment language is specifically geared towards CRCT, and that's going to have to be cleaned up. But no, we have enough on our plate. We're asking teachers to do enough already. We've got plenty of initiatives on our plate, so I have no desire for anything new. All right, thank you all.
Thank you very much, John. Just a few minutes, I'm going to give you a few administrative pieces, but the question was raised about Superintendent Barge has done a great job for us in moving our state forward. What's going to happen next? And that can be a scary thing. The Georgia Chamber in their board meeting next week is having all 8 candidates on a panel for the business leaders to listen to. But we will have a panel after the primaries. Actually, it's going to be mid-August at one of our critical issue forums, and many of you come to those. I welcome you to come to any of them, but it's August 16th or something like that. But it'll be a debate among the final superintendent of the state, or state superintendent candidates. So stay tuned for that. Speaking of that, we hope today was worth your time. Hope it was informative, gives you some information, some contacts. We hope that you will help us make this even better next time by filling out the evaluation form and just leaving it on the table. This will give us feedback that we can tweak this a little bit and make it even better. We would love to be a resource for you. We are for many of you. Sometimes it's helpful for you to call Dana or me, or you call Bill, and Bill will hook us up pretty quickly. He tracks us down wherever we are across the state, but we will be glad to talk with you. Sometimes you just want to know, so explain this controversy to me. Give me both sides of the argument, or 3 sides if there are, and we'd be glad to do that. Sometimes you reference us, sometimes you don't, but we'd like to be that resource for you. So call Bill, and Dana and I will always be glad to help you. The video of this Media Symposium, Bill will send you an email soon with the link to this, so you'll be able to watch this, or some of your colleagues who weren't able to make it today, you can share that with them or refer them back to our website. And the top 10 will be on our website later this afternoon, so you can download that or refer it to other people. If you'd like some hard copies, you heard earlier our policy is that we'll send out 2 free copies to anybody. If you want multiple copies, then we'll just ask that you pay for the postage. Bill hooked us up with the Georgia News Network this week, and we had an interview with John Clark that will be published on their 119 stations across the state on Sunday. If you're up that early in the morning, you get a real quick half-hour overview of all 10 of the issues, so we encourage you to join that too. Bill, any other last-minute announcements, or Diane?
that pretty much covers it. As you go out, there's some cookies and goodies still left in here and sandwich if you got a long ride. Please help yourself to that. But we're so glad you took the time. Our mission is to make this symposium valuable to you because we know how valuable your time is. So I hope you leave saying it was a wise investment.
Thank you for coming, and let's stay in touch. Drive safely.